Available now from bookshops.
Sue Riley is the boss, embattled by reduced resources, fighting for quality patient care. In public and in private, she takes the camera on her daily rounds.
I'm not taking being told off for other people's problems.
But first, she must get her team's support.
I wanted to demonstrate the standards of care I expected from everyone else.
Living the life of Riley, the boss, tonight, 7:20 on BBC Two.
The early evening news and sport on BBC Two now with Jenny Bond and Rob Bonnet.
The boxer knocked out in a title fight is now on a life support machine. Doctors have removed a blood clot from his brain. Condemnation of the crowd violence that followed the fight, an inquiry is underway. Hijackers are holding 25 tourists hostage on a coach near the Kremlin. And Willie Klaas concedes he may have to resign from NATO over the corruption charges he still denies. Good evening. The boxer James Murray is on a life support machine after being critically injured in a British title fight in Glasgow last night. Surgeons have removed a blood clot from his brain. Police and boxing officials have begun an investigation into the violence that broke out among the crowd. As the fight ended, fans started throwing bottles, glasses and chairs. 3 people were injured.
2 heavy punches to the head and James Murray is knocked out in the final round of a title fight. While the bloodied victor, Drew Docherty, celebrates, it soon becomes clear his opponent is seriously injured. But as doctors desperately tried to treat 25-year-old Murray in the ring, violence erupted in the hall. Amid scenes of mayhem, chairs and bottles were hurled across the room, with some spectators diving for cover. Impassioned pleas for calm, though, appeared to be ignored.
Will you please behave yourselves, lads? We got an injured boxer in the ring. Will you please?
While some spectators suffered minor injuries, Murray was stretchered away for urgent medical attention. At Glasgow's Southern General Hospital, surgeons operated immediately to remove a blood clot on the brain. His condition, however, remains critical.
I think the critical period certainly would last for some days. I mean, he's in a very unstable state at the moment.
While Murray's family has been told to expect the worst, the scenes of violence after the fight brought swift condemnation from both promoters and other boxers, who blame a drunken, rowdy minority for the trouble.
I'm very angry about it. It's just, I'm angry and I'm sad about it. I feel sad for James Murray and I'm angry at the people that started the trouble.
While the promoters insist there were sufficient security staff in the hotel for a crowd of 550, the British Boxing Board of Control has promised a full inquiry into the trouble, which is also being investigated by Strathclyde Police. Once again, though, the world of boxing is under intense pressure to improve even further medical support at the ringside. But after numerous tragedies over the years, the British Medical Association has restated its long-held view: just how many more boxers have to suffer serious brain damage before their calls for a ban are heeded. John McIntyre, BBC News.
A tourist bus with 25 South Koreans on board has been hijacked near the Kremlin in Moscow. Police say 2 hijackers are involved and that negotiations have started. The hijackers are believed to be demanding a large ransom.
Hostage-taking has become fairly common in Russia recently, but this is the first instance in the capital. 2 men commandeered a bus containing 25 South Koreans, plus a driver and tour guide, right in the heart of the city, at a popular tourist site just next to the Kremlin walls. The hijackers are said to be North Koreans and are demanding $10 million for the release of the hostages. The area has been cordoned off by police and negotiations are taking place. In past incidents, the Russian authorities have tried different solutions, sometimes giving in to hostage-takers' demands only to hunt them down later, and sometimes taking them by storm. With foreigners involved in this case, they're likely to tread especially carefully. Angus Roxburgh, BBC News, Moscow.
3 days after the ceasefire was declared in Bosnia, aid workers are warning of a humanitarian crisis as Serb refugees flee from fighting in the northwest of the country. After taking control of the town of Sanski Most, Bosnian government troops and their Croat allies have been shelling Prijedor. The UN fears that the town of Banja Luka may be the next target. Tens of thousands of Bosnian Serbs have fled their homes. They're now taking refuge in already overcrowded Serb-held towns. A death sentence imposed on a Filipino maid who killed her employer in the United Arab Emirates has been revoked. The president, Sheikh bin Sultan Al Nahyan, persuaded the dead man's family to accept compensation instead. 16-year-old Sarah Balabagan was convicted of stabbing her employer, but maintained she had acted in self-defense when he raped her. A judge in Milan has ruled that the former Italian Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi must stand trial on corruption charges. The media tycoon is accused of offering bribes to tax inspectors. He'll go on trial in January. If convicted, Mr. Berlusconi could be jailed for up to 3 years. The NATO Secretary-General, Willy Klaas, has conceded for the first time that he may have to resign. He said he was considering his position after a recommendation that he be stripped of his Belgian parliamentary immunity and stand trial on charges of corruption, fraud and forgery. Mr. Klaas denies the charges, which relate to his time as economics minister 7 years ago.
The NATO Secretary-General faced 6 hours of questioning by the Special Parliamentary Commission investigating corruption before they recommended he should be stripped of his immunity from prosecution to face possible criminal charges. For the first time, NATO's Secretary-General is conceding he may resign, although Willy Klaas still maintains he has no case to answer.
I've had the opportunity to confirm that I'm totally innocent, as well in the Augusta as in the Dassault affair.
The allegations against Willy Klaas surround his authorization as a senior Belgian minister for the purchase in 1988 of 46 army helicopters. The Italian makers Augusta later paid over £1 million to Mr. Klaas's political party, the Flemish Socialists. 4 ministers have already resigned over the affair. Several party officials are on trial. Within NATO, the growing feeling is Mr. Klaas should resign quickly, rather than risk the effectiveness and credibility of the alliance by waiting to be forced out. Mr. Klaas may still try to hang on, at least until after the lower house of Belgium's parliament finally decides next Thursday whether or not to hand him over to the courts. But when NATO ambassadors see Mr. Klaas on Monday, alliance governments are likely to increase the pressure on him to go quickly. Already, very discreet soundings are being taken about a possible successor. James Robbins, BBC News, Brussels.
The author, Ellis Peters, creator of the Brother Cadfael stories, has died aged 82. The writer, whose real name was Edith Pargeter, published more than 60 novels. Her stories about the medieval monk who turned detective were adapted for radio and television. The funeral of the former Conservative Prime Minister, Lord Hume, has taken place in the Scottish border town of Coldstream. He died on Monday at the age of 92. Family, close friends and workers from his estate attended the service. Lord Hume was buried alongside his wife, Elizabeth, in a plot overlooking the Cheviot Hills, said to be one of his favourite views. Now, with news of today's football and the rest of the sport, here's Rob Bonnet.
Newcastle United's high-speed start to the season continued this afternoon with a 3-2 win at Queen's Park Rangers. 2 of their goals came from Keith Gillespie, the other from Les Ferdinand, who was returning for the first time to his former club. Elsewhere, Manchester City manager Alan Ball used the word poor to describe United, despite City's defeat by a Paul Scholes goal in the Manchester derby. Dennis Bergkamp was on target again for Arsenal as they won emphatically at Leeds. And Lars Bohinen scored on his debut for Blackburn in their win against Southampton following his transfer from Nottingham Forest. So Newcastle's lead remains at 4 points, though now Manchester United are second, 2 points ahead of Arsenal. Liverpool are fourth after only drawing at home to Coventry. Forest are fifth. Aston Villa dropped to sixth after a home defeat by Chelsea. In the NC League First Division, the leaders Leicester drew 1-1 at home with Charlton, for whom Carl Lieben scored the equaliser. Leicester stay top, though, since second-placed Millwall also drew at home with Tranmere. West Brom go third after winning at Luton. Sunderland drew, but Birmingham and Norwich both won. Meanwhile, Wolverhampton Wanderers manager Graham Taylor is under further pressure following his side's 4-1 home defeat by Stoke, who scored twice against replacement goalkeeper Dean Richards, normally a defender. Nevertheless, Wolves have won only 3 games in 12. In Scotland...